welcome everybody to Beats, Beds, and Browns. We're happy to have State Representative Earl Harris Jr. representing Indiana House District 2 in Lake County, here to speak about HB 1283 as well as his background and legislative journey. So thank you, Representative Harris. I appreciate you being here. Let's jump right into it. Why civil service?
Yeah, so I actually come from, it's in my background, so it's kind of in my DNA. My father actually had this seat for 33 years, and he actually did some other, civil service or serving the community things as well. But he was in this seat for 33 years. He passed away in March of 15. My mother was elected to finish his term, and then I ran and was elected. And so it's something I've been around almost all my life. I jokingly tell people that I already knew where the restrooms were at the State House, which is half the battle. And, when people talk about, wow, your mother, your father, and you, and I say it's all part of the Harris family plan for world domination, starting with the second House district in Indiana. So it was something that's been modeled for me almost all of my life. I saw, my father and the things he did to help out people, help out organizations, help out the city, help out the community. And it really, even before I ran for office, I worked in public education for a long time. And so I ran, my career and background in education has to do with television and video production. So I ran the television and video production department for a school system. And part of what was big for me also, besides producing content for the school district, whether it was videos for the school district to use, or we actually had television shows, is working with students, mentoring students, teaching them about television and video production, and also just kind of in general, being a mentor if they had questions about college, life, et cetera. I just, to me, that was big and important for me to do.
And then an entrepreneurial background as well, which we cover not only from the artist's perspective, but some of the distillers have some unique entrepreneur stories. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah. So what I went to school for, is television and video production. So my undergrad is from IUPUI in Indianapolis, telecommunications degree, and master's from Ball State, telecommunications with an emphasis on digital storytelling. So I do television video production. I have a company called Motivation Media, and I've done anything from broadcast TV. I actually have a couple of Emmy nominations for a show I used to produce on Fox Sports Midwest. Being an elected official, I did my own, commercials and videos. Also have done things for other candidates, 30-second spots or videos they've used online. And then even some corporate, for-profit companies and nonprofit companies, videos people use for communications, marketing, things like that. So it's fun. I enjoy being creative, and television and video production allows that type of outlet. So it's a lot of fun for me. And, I don't get to do as much of that since I've been in office because, being in office takes up a lot of time, but I still get to work on projects.
Yeah. Nice. So Motivation Media is still up and running?
Still up and running. I need to, on my list of things now, the session kind of takes over your life for the beginning of the year. And so I'm in the process of working on a new website because my current website is way outdated. So I hope you didn't look it up because it needs a lot of help. But, that's on the list of things to do because it's important for me to keep the company going. I haven't, as I said, being in office has taken some time away from it, but I still value the company and want to keep it going.
Sure. And that's our actual profession as well. Mm-hmm. So this venture is more of a side venture and way to continue interests on ours. So if we can ever be a resource for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I always love creative television video people. That's always a good thing to make connections with.
Yeah. And the dynamics of it with social media and the consumption is just outpacing every other form of media consumption. Yeah. I think the term now is new media journalism, right? Where everybody has the smartphone handy and can become a journalist with the press of a button. So maybe not as polished, or the production quality might not be as high. But
because as you said, you do this as well. One of the things that's been interesting to me is technology has made it easier for us that do it as a profession because I remember the days of $100,000 editing rooms, which now you can have an Apple laptop, you can have either Final Cut Pro or Adobe and an external hard drive, and voila, you have a professional editing suite that doesn't cost $100,000 anymore and you can do anywhere. So it's been great for us, but it also means that everybody, wants to get into this field. So it's interesting to see what kind of things people come up with on the creative side.
Oh, absolutely. And the barriers to entry into the market are so much lower at this point. Yeah. And what we find from an engagement standpoint is production quality isn't as much of an indicator to success.
Yeah.
You've got the Coles Chewbacca mom on one end, and then obviously the Emmy nominated content that you're putting out on the other end of that spectrum. So
yeah, I was trying to say that yes, you're correct. The spectrum is interesting in terms of quality, but if people are putting out content, and if it's it's all about telling the story. So if you tell the story effectively, that's what the bottom line is.
Absolutely. To that end, the story of your progression into the House, and talk about some of the accomplishments that you're most proud of.
We work on a lot of things, being in the Indiana legislature. And it's something, to me, it's big on some of the areas I focus on have to do with education, of course, since I worked in that for a long time. Economic development, workforce development, career development, that's kind of, also tied to education. So, legislation that I've had, I had a couple of bills that became law this year that are connected to that. One of them is House Bill 1090. And I'm a big believer in tourism for us here in Northwest Indiana, because we have beaches. When you look at 3 of the 4 cities I represent, Gary, East Chicago, and Hammond, all are on the lake. So there are lakefronts there. So House Bill 1090 will help out with opening up some things and allow more lakefront development. The city of Gary, Mayor Prince, the mayor of Gary, his administration came to me and talked to me about working with them on this bill and carrying it. So that will allow for growth on our lakefront, which will help out in terms of economic development, it'll help out in terms of jobs. And it also will help out in terms of the mission of really building up more tourism here in Northwest Indiana. And when you also look at the other bill that I had, which has to do with urban agriculture zones, that one is also connected to education and, economic development as well. And it will allow for, my area, the cities I represent, East Chicago, represent all over part of East Chicago, Gary, Hammond, and Griffith, are not rural, not farming communities, but there are people that want to do farming here. And so it will allow for pieces of land to become, through the local municipality's final say on that, a urban agriculture zone. So it allows for tax breaks, and it will allow on the land, and it will allow for tax breaks in terms of utilities, water connection, et cetera. So it will be up to them, the municipality, to decide if they want to give 100% of the land that someone offers, or 75% or 50, or whatever their decision is. It's their call. So I'm proud of those 2 bills this year, because they really fit heavily into what I am focused on. In my first year in office, I had a bill. East Chicago was facing a lead issue. And so the first bill I had become law helped out the city of East Chicago because this was something that was really tragic to the area. So I was glad to walk into the legislature and be able to do something like that to help my area.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing those accomplishments. And we definitely here at Beats, Beds, and Browns want to dig into HB 1283 and talk about the ideation and the struggle to get it passed. I know it passed unanimously. Maybe talk through some of the challenges and the foundation of where you took inputs in order to create the bill.
Yeah. So I had the idea and did some research and saw there were actually some other places in the country that have worked on some things like this. And so it stemmed from providing opportunity. And so did a little research, looked into the bill in terms of deciding how it would be structured. We also have LSA, which is Legislative Services Agency. They are amazing. They help us. We can basically come with an idea, send an email and say, here's my idea, here's what I want to do. And they do all of the work that I do not have enough smarts to do to make it, put the legislation together, make sure everything is legal, and really form a great bill. So they were a great help with that, as they always are. And, there was some conversation had and a lot of support, which I greatly appreciated. Chairman Leahy, who's over the Agricultural Committee, we normally as legislators, we file our bills, they get moved into whatever committee there are. So this one got moved into into the Agriculture Committee. And honestly, I hadn't had a chance to talk to him yet. And before session, I was having a conversation with another representative. about another piece of legislation. And he came over to me and said, "Hey, I really have a great interest in your bill. I'm thinking about giving it a hearing. Has anyone spoken negatively to you about it?" And I said, "No, I haven't had any negative content at all." And so he goes, "Let me think about it." So we had some follow-up conversations. So I actually have to give him credit because he actually approached me before I did. And I really, had some reach out to Indiana Farm Bureau. They were great supporters. I have to give Purdue credit. And I jokingly say they're kind of the enemy because I have an IU and a Ball State degree, but I give Purdue credit because I started working on this before session and I connected with them and they set up a tour for me in Indianapolis. And so I got to see some urban agriculture going on in Indianapolis, and it really built on the idea that I had. And I added to the idea. So I have to give them a lot of credit and give people in Indianapolis a lot of credit. And then you had like this South Shore Convention and Visitor Association. They were big supporters because they looked at it as, hey, local people can grow things and sell to restaurants. Obviously, restaurants fit into that tourism side. So they were a big supporter as well. So it was great to get a lot of people involved. And then the Purdue tour they set up, I was able to connect with some other organizations as well. And then some of the food groups were also involved because they see that as a way to get more food in front of people that maybe in a food desert or just have food issues, because there's been a lot of donations going on, or a lot of people going to food pantries because of COVID. And so food pantries have been hit hard. And this is one way to help out in terms of getting more food into pantries.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing insight into the process. I wondered how the sausage gets made, so to speak. And in reading the bill, there were so many references to other existing statutes. This is by definition in this paragraph over here. And it's like, wow, I thought, you just say this happens and it's going to happen, but not so much. See,
that's the magic of LSA. They realize what this connects to this Indiana code or this changes that Indiana code. They do that. And you're right. The sausage, depending on the piece of legislation, the sausage is made in so many different ways. And not everybody sees that, but it's an interesting process.
And for a bill to be passed with bipartisan support in today's political climate, that's something to be proud of, certainly.
Yeah, it's an honor. And I have to say, I'm a Democrat in Indiana, and we know that Indiana is very heavily Republican in terms of, it's a supermajority in the House where I am, the Senate. The Governor Holcomb is Republican. And I greatly appreciate the fact that the Republican members of the legislature were in support of this, because we, as a Democrat, we don't have enough Democrats to get anything passed. And so the fact that Republicans were joined on to this bill, a lot of them asked to be, whether it was co-authors or co-sponsors in the Senate. And I greatly appreciate that. It's great to see such a bill be such a bipartisan bill that no matter if you have a D or an R behind your name, you like the idea and we're willing to help out and help it get across the finish line.
Definitely something that's appreciated by your constituents and the farming community and tourism as well. Yeah. You talked about touring some of these other areas that had urban agricultural bills. Can you talk to me about what those farms look like, what the actual production is, and how somebody goes about being confirmed is? So
one of the first location they showed me in Indianapolis is actually right off of where the Colts practice is, their facility is. So it's literally, you can see it in the background. And I forget how big this piece of land is. It's a big piece of land, and the city runs it. And they did, because of COVID, they didn't charge it. Normally, I think it was like a $50 fee for a piece of this land that you can farm on. Because of COVID, they waived it. There's a water hookup. So if you bring your water hose, you can plug into that and water what you have. And so people there grow it. Some people grow it because they want to eat it themselves. There are people that grow things there that they donate to food pantries. That's their whole goal. So it was interesting to see. That was one that was very community based. There was another one they showed me, which was on a church. So the church owns a big piece of land. And so they had kind of the same thing where part of it you could, as a person in the community, rent, shall we say, a piece of land and grow things. But then part of it, they was 100%, we're donating this to food pantries. And then the third location was actually off of I-70 and Shadeland. And, I kind of thought about it. This is an 8-acre land, about 8 acres. It's off the highway. So the likelihood of houses being there was pretty low because it's noisy. So they took this 8 acres, they made into urban agriculture farming area. they hire students, high school students, summer jobs. In fact, they said there are about 2 or 3 of them. The students looked at it as, well, it's a summer job. That's all I care about. And then just fell in love with farming and agriculture. And they'd actually hired a couple of them as full-time employees. 100%. So this big 8-9 acre land, 100% of what they grow there, they give to food pantries. So I thought that was great. That was the whole thing, is we're going to make sure we give back to the people, and we know people have taken, had a hard road, and food pantries have been hit hard over COVID. So
is that a not-for-profit or something that our listeners or viewers can donate to, or is that self-funded through donations? Or
that one is the city. It's city land. So the city of Indianapolis does it. So they help out with that. They have, 1 or 2 people on staff, and then students that they have work during the summertime. So that I really give the mayor and the city of Mayor Hogshead, who's the mayor of Indianapolis, and the city credit for doing something and using land that probably, in terms of building or economic development that way, probably wasn't going to happen because of its location off the highway, but they were able to turn it into something positive.
Yeah.
And the student part was big for me in terms of looking at doing this, because, I share this and I tell people, agriculture, farming is more than just digging a hole, throwing in the seeds and watering it. There's science involved. So if you have young people that are involved in this, they're learning about science. And then I'm a big believer in, you get young people exposed to career options that they don't know about. They may find something they love. And so for an area like mine, which is very urban, getting students, and like Indianapolis, in that example, getting students in front of, involved in an agricultural area, there's a love that they may not even know that they have, or they have an interest in science or whatever. It's a great opportunity for them to learn about something that they otherwise would not have been exposed to. So that, to me, is a good thing.
That's admirable impact of the bill. And we share, it is magic. It is Jack and the Beanstalk. You do throw seeds in the ground and you water them, and out springs fruit that'll sustain you, your family, your community. And we're actually working to get interview with Corey Hagelberg at My Brother's Keeper in Gary, where they're creating a permaculture environment, and they also donate the produce to the local pantry. But that would be a nice tie-in to this as well, and potentially connecting them with the bill to be able to become an urban agricultural space.
Yeah. I mean, that's my thing right now, is getting the word out. And in fact, I have a meeting I'm in the process of locking in for next Wednesday with people from East Chicago Central High School here in East Chicago. Reached out and they want to talk about the bill and what they can do with it. So I'm glad to see that people are taking advantage of it. It's actually having a bigger effect than I thought it would. So that makes me even prouder than I already am.
And the not-for-profit connection and the church community with additional land to be able to offset. I know that churches don't have the same tax burden, but to be able to alleviate some of that as well as add value to the community.
One of the other benefits that has come out of the piece of legislation for me is we have areas where there's land that people own but aren't using. It's just there. A lot of times they don't even pay taxes on it. And so it just becomes a blight for areas. So that land is overgrown with weeds, vegetation. And in some cases, unfortunately, we know that people will use those pieces of land as a dump site. So they'll dump, their garbage or whatever they have. And so what this legislation will also do is allow for those pieces of land, if it's somebody that's not going to do anything with it, they or other people can approach them and say, hey, can we use this land and apply for it to become an urban agriculture zone? Clean it up, and therefore the blight goes away, the garbage goes away, and it actually has a functioning purpose in communities and in neighborhoods and in cities. So that's another benefit to it, because anytime you can clear blight out, it actually will help grow and make cities and municipalities more attractive.
Sure. Are there particular tracts of land that you've identified in your district that may be able to take advantage of this bill? Or
yeah, I won't mention any specific locations, but yeah, we do have some areas up here in my neck of the woods. In fact, that's when there was a newspaper article about the bill before it became law, when it was going through the process. And I had actually some people I knew that I've known for years and didn't know they were actually involved in urban agriculture and urban farming. And that's one of the things that we've talked about in those conversations is there's land here that people are not taking care of. And this will hopefully allow for those type of, for them to become urban agriculture zones and get some actual good use out of it. Because there also is some urban farming that's happening here in Northwest Indiana, in the Gary area. There's a lot of people in Gary that reached out, and I've seen a lot of things that they're doing. So we're doing it here. If this makes it better, easier, that's great.
And I love to hear all things ag. A big fan of Thomas Jefferson and the gentleman gardener or gentleman farmer, and to hear that we're giving the tools to give people that access and be able to be more in contact with their food, and the supply chain is wonderful. And even
one of the people that reached out to me is a Pastor Whitaker, and he at his church, they have a part of the land there. They're growing things. They also have goats and ducks and other animals there. He talked about that he will work with school systems. So as we work through this process, he'll work with school systems to teach them. And it really is the economic development part is big for me as well. I believe the term is farm to table. And that's
farm to table, farm to fork. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pasture to plate. I mean, there's a bunch of them, right?
Yeah. There's probably more than I know of. And that's why the South Shore's Convention and Visitor Association was so interested, because they look at it as, hey, that's connected to tourism, because if local people grow things, vegetables, fruits, etc., and they sell them to local restaurants, that's economic development. That helps with tourism. One of the things that's going on here in terms of tourism in Northwest Indiana is the opening of the Hard Rock Casino in Gary, Indiana. So you're talking about multiple restaurants in the location that will continue to grow out. So, that will also add some economic development opportunities for urban agriculture farming zones and the people that run those to sell their wares to people like Hard Rock and other restaurants in the area. So that's part of the economic development of it also.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see the spectrum as well, from your startup farmers to the commercial ag industry. Obviously, we've got chicken and pork production along 65.
Yeah.
Homestead farms on either side of Kankakee. We've got Howe Farms here in Crown Point that we're working with. And if we can get these startup farms, and as defined, right? It's startup, or they've got it all defined as to who can apply. And
now I'm glad you said that, because there's, you always see comments on social media, and someone, there was some comments about, well, won't this just allow for the big farming companies to come in and take over? And the response to that is no, it's actually written specifically so that only small farmers can do this. It's not something where a big conglomerate corporate, nothing against them, but it's not set up for them to come in and have a piece of land become an urban agriculture zone. And again, I'm a big local control person. Having the fact that the municipality makes the final say, whether you get 100% of whatever the land is, 75%, 50, that local control in there is also, to me, another safety factor and control factor in making sure it's the small guy, the small farmers that are able to apply and become an agricultural zone.
So, yeah, and if you could expound upon that a bit, we've got, it open up to statewide, but everybody has to apply individually. And who they apply to is based on their municipal government, and if it's a township or a trustee board or
a city. Yeah, there's a whole process. So there will be a hearing, the public can get involved. So the cities will set up the 100% specifics of how that works, but it's laid out, the structure of it's laid out is that the city will have a hearing, they'll announce it, they'll let people know when it's going to happen. And it's up to the municipality, the city, the town, whatever it is, to make that final call. So local control is there, and the community will have an opportunity to have some input. So, hopefully all of the ways that people apply for this are good, but the community will be able to have some input and say, hey, this is not a good idea because of this, or hey, this is a great idea because it's a great use of this land that's been unused.
Yeah, and I think I have the past version here. It's a small or medium-sized farmer, a beginning farmer, a limited resource farmer, or a socially disadvantaged farmer.
Yep.
That's who this is for.
Yes, right.
We see a lot of the judicial resonance of cannabis being legal in Illinois and Michigan, and we hear about pass-through traffic and increased strain on the penal system. as we're interviewing more and more agricultural interests, it becomes an advantage for these other companies to have grow facilities, distribution facilities, retail sales. Is that something that you see Indiana undertaking in the near future?
So when Indiana is a conservative state. And when you talk about growing cannabis and things like that, I know, if I'm not mistaken, the governor has mentioned that that's not something he has an interest in. There's been some people that have filed legislation and tried to get it done. My belief and understanding at this point is it's not something that the majority party has a great interest in. That's something that, may change over time. I mean, the reality is, the urban agriculture zone, both my bills, the urban agriculture zone was year one, I filed it, year one, it became law. There's also the long game. There's people that, that there may be a bill that takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So it's just going to depend on, what the makeup is and structure is in terms of the governor's office, in terms of legislature. If there are more and more people that become elected that have an interest in it, then it will happen. So it's probably a matter of time here in Indiana. I won't put any bets on how long.
Sure.
But, and you have the economic part of it. You have, as states around us, it becomes law or legal there, that may have an effect. So we'll see. So I didn't see that.
And the federal notion as well, right? It may come from the top down.
Yeah.
I know it's still a unbankable industry. You run into a lot of issues with cash using debit card versus credit, and then the merchant services providers not being able to service them based on their.
There's a lot of dynamics to that situation that have to be worked out. So we'll see what happens here in Indiana. So and other people have asked me that similar question. And I tell them, it's probably a matter of time. It's just a matter of when. And I would not take any bets at this point on how long that'll be.
Yeah, well, and off the record, I'm just surprised at the crossover. I didn't start this looking to be involved in that discussion. And whether it's the CBD farm in Beecher, we're trying to coordinate an interview with PharmaCann, who has a cultivation facility in Dwight, Illinois. And then the retail name under Verilife is who they're operating. So, yeah, it's just and even Mott Handley, who I'm sure you're familiar with from Pit Moss, talking about RFID chip tracking from seed to retail for not only the cannabis industry, but other ag industries as well. So,
there's a lot to that. There's a lot to that. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, the depth of it is what I'm really intrigued on. You think, people just want to sit in a corner and smoke, and they don't know this is big business, and the consolidation that's happening now is going to be, Indiana, other communities potentially missed opportunity for the aggregation and buy-in.
The economic development part may add in some pressure. Because, how much are we losing in tax revenue that other states are getting? And especially if it's, like my area. I mean, I live in East Chicago. I can be in Illinois in 10 minutes. Yeah. So, people are going across the state line in just like that.
So you talk about the students, potentially jobs created by these opportunities, and students having exposure to tourism, supply chain, science backgrounds. From the examples that you mentioned and sites that you visited, are there any examples outside of the students with the summertime jobs taking an interest?
Just that this last site that they took me on in Indianapolis, they've had students that became full-time employees. And I'm sure there are students that looked at this and it became their career option. I don't remember them telling me any specific stories, but I know that there's an interest here in my home city and school system here in East Chicago about learning about this and getting more information. So I mentioned earlier, there's a meeting that I'm in the process of finalizing for next coming up with some staff from the school that want to talk about this. So they're looking at this as something that they can do with their students. And I'm sure there are or will be other parts around the state that will also dive into this and look at it as an educational option for their young people.
And how about you, Representative Harris? Are you do you have a green thumb? Do you grow?
I'm a city boy, but I come from farmers. I mean, my father grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, so he grew up on a farm. They moved up here to Chicago from Tennessee, and I remember, and he's no longer alive, but I remember my grandfather turned, in fact, my legislation is years way too late for him, but he actually turned the backyard into his farm. I mean, so he would grow things in the backyard. I mean, he just loved farming. So
Nice.
It's in the DNA. I can't say that I have done a lot of it myself. I'm kind of city-fied, but I do come from people that are grew up on the farm. My mom's side as well. We have family in Texas on my mom's side that have also grown up. That have also been in the farming industry. So it's in the DNA. It hasn't just come out of me yet. We'll see.
Nice. Well, we'll be sure all of our Zoom interviews in person, we have them plant one of the seeds that we saved from last year and
Nice.
some dirt and go home with a cup. So we're working on how to distribute that in a nice package. We'll make sure that you get one, and
Right.
you can either have some dill or some acorn squash for you.
Ooh, that sounds kind of cool. I really should. And I hate to say, I hate that I had to answer the question the way I answered in terms of not having a green thumb myself, considering I authored the legislation. But I really should try growing some things. I mean, that's also, even if you don't have per se dirt and land, there are, what do they call it? The beds.
Container gardens, raised beds.
Yeah, raised beds. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, even if you don't have a huge piece of land, on your home or your background or whatever, beds are also a way to grow some things as well. So maybe I need to do something like that and dive into it and see what I can grow.
Yeah, it's fun. As you get into it, you talk to more and more people, and pretty soon you're like in this conversation of 5-7 people. They've all got their tomatoes or cucumbers at home, and you're sharing tips and tricks and insect remediation. It's a budding community that we've jumped in, as is brown spirits and the hip hop industry as well. So, are you a music fan? Do you indulge in any hip hop or?
I am. When I talk about DNA, I have to share this with you. My Coco Taylor, remember the Queen of Blues, was my aunt. And my father was a singer. He actually had a recording contract offer. I don't know if you remember BJ Records out of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So he actually had a recording contract offer. And then I won Who's Your Idol in 2017.
No way.
It was always my dream for Prince to discover me, but for some reason he did not come to East Chicago looking for me. So music has always been a great love of mine. It's always been one of those things I've loved since, as long as I can remember. I didn't pursue, I don't like to have regrets, but I did not pursue it the way I should have pursued it. So that's my own fault. But yeah, I'm a music lover. I love music. And really, wish I had worked harder to make it a bigger part of my life and possibly a career in something I did.
Well, now we have your civil service, your family to thank for your civil service, and for the blues influence that Coco Taylor had. That's a impressive musical history there.
Yeah. She as a person, she was just a very nice woman. So besides her talent and the fame and all success and all that, she's just a very nice woman.
Absolutely. And how about bourbon, whiskey?
I actually don't drink. And so I'll share this with you also, because people that know this kind of go, huh? We owned a bar and a liquor store. And in junior high, my job was to clean up the liquor store. But I just never really had an interest. I'm not against it, so I don't mind if people, if I hang out with friends or whatever. It's just drinking is not something that ever had a great interest to me. It probably kept me out of a lot of trouble. And I was my friend's favorite designated driver. So, but I appreciate like going to Napa. I've been to Napa a lot, wineries, wine bars, different, we have stuff here in Northwest Indiana, 18th Street, et cetera. So I enjoy the environment. I love being in those places. I just not really interested in, or not really, but not interested in indulging in alcohol. But I'm good with it when it does. So.
Oh yeah, no, that's everybody's personal choice. We don't apply pressure. We just inquire as to interest. It's
you're not gonna have people protesting outside of my house.
We interviewed Paul Hletko at Few Spirits in Evanston, which was the foundation of the temperance movement. So there's some inside joke about FEW actually being the initials of the woman who started the temperance movement, and kind of a behind the scenes gotcha. But they disavowed that in person. So that's written lore.
Well, and I mean, environments like those are just, I mean, they're cool and fun to hang out with. I was for an anniversary party recently at Tequila and Tacos in Miller Beach area. So, I love the environments. I just usually have an iced tea or a Sprite.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and they've all taken their turn, right? It's all just marketing.
Yeah.
First it was the sommelier, then craft beer had their Cicerone, and now brown spirits are having their moment, so to speak. But marketing turns a steaming cup of brown liquid into coffee, right? And the same thing for wine, craft beer, and whiskey. So
isn't Starbucks, are they like Starbucks Reserves or something? They're going to be doing alcohol, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
So some of them have had beer and wine for a while. I think the Reserve, there's two locations, the downtown one and another. But I think those are more.
Downtown Naperville, I think, is supposed to have one.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mentioned House Bill 1090. I mean, lakefronts are a big part of, tourism here in Northwest Indiana. We talk about the lakefronts, talk about our proximity to Chicago. We have the Gary Airport. And so what will happen and go on the lakefronts will be development. I mean, when you look at other parts of the country, you can sit and, have dinner or have drinks with family, friends, dates, etc. So there'll be a lot of different entertainment things that'll go on the lakefront that will come here out of that bill. And that'll help out with, jobs, whether it's the short-term jobs of the construction, then obviously long-term jobs of people that become permanent employees. So there's an economic development part in that. And then I also, when you talk about my interest in helping out young people with careers, the more we can bring to the area, the more likely our young people will stay and not feel like they have to leave the area to have a career. And again, the assets that we have here in Northwest Indiana are huge. And, one of the other things, and we're working on drawing people over from Illinois, from Chicago, the double tracking train, which the funding is in for that, is when you look at Northwest Indiana, the cost of living it's great. I mean, a house doesn't cost you a fortune. Property taxes don't cost you a fortune. When you go to our grocery stores and our gas stations, you see a lot of Illinois plates. I bought a new house last year that I moved into this year. So I've spent a lot of time going to Lowe's. So even Lowe's in Cherville, a lot of Illinois plates there. So we're really working on adding to the quality of life here in Northwest Indiana, no matter what realm that is, and drawing people over. And I think we're on the verge of, with the Hard Rock in Gary and a lot of other growth that, that'll bring in other people and other interests in the area. We're really at a point where Northwest Indiana is taking off and it's growing. My father used to say when he was in office, as goes Gary, goes Northwest Indiana. So there's a lot of opportunity here, East Chicago, Hammond, there's a lot of stuff going on in those cities as well. So I'm very happy and love being here in Northwest Indiana and happy to talk about the assets of it and why everyone should move here.
Sure. Well, in a reemergence of the Northwest Indiana extravagance, right? I mean, they read some of the history and the first theaters that brought in Chicagoans, some of the Rat Pack history. Hammond especially
Kennedy came through here. I mean, that was the value of Northwest Indiana. When he became president, he came through East Chicago. So there's a lot of history here that not everyone knows. I remember when I was a small child, the economics. We had here in East Chicago, we had Mademoiselle, which was a high-end women's clothing store, and Arnold's men's clothing store, which is a high-end men's. So we had a lot of those things. There was a dip, when the steel industry took a hit. It really affected the area and brought things down, but it's climbing, it's the phoenix rising out of the dust. It's climbing back up.
Sure. A furniture manufacturing history, laundry soap manufacturing history, union.
There was actually a car company briefly back in the early 1900s called Famous, I believe. There was actually a car company here in East Chicago. I need to look more into that. I want to learn more about that, but I just know that it existed.
I love region history.
Yeah. There's a lot of history here. Yeah, it's a great place to live.
So I'm vaguely familiar with the Digital Crossroads. Tom Dakich came and spoke to our Rotary Club. That's in your district as well, and I assume potentially huge asset to the lakefront community and redevelopment in Hammond.
Yeah, Tom put together a great project. I'm one of the co-authors of the bill, which passed a couple of years ago. I mean, everything is gone digital. You can't. I mean, what we're doing now is digital.
Right.
So, when you look at some of your major companies, your Facebook, your Amazon, your Netflix, there's a long list of them. They need places to store that digital material, digital media, digital whatever it is. And so Tom, had a great idea about here in Northwest Indiana, again, benefits that we've already talked about, and moving that here. So it's a great idea. I was glad to be a part of that and glad to help out and get that moving on. So, and I think that's another thing we can look at here when you talk about growing the area are those type of, thinking out of the box. I remember when Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson was over the city of Gary, and she went after Amazon. Remember, they were looking at their, where they're going to move their new centers, and people were like, why would Gary consider that? And my response, I actually wrote an op-ed. Why not? I mean, what she did, even though it didn't happen, but it put Gary on the radar of a lot of people in Northwest Indiana, on the radar of a lot of people that didn't think about it. And all of a sudden started thinking about us and the assets we have. So, you have to think big, dream big, if you want to call it dreaming big, but you have to think big and, look at what we can do here and why, if we can be done in Silicon Valley in California or New York or even across the state line in Chicago, why can't we do those same things here in Northwest Indiana? So again, Tom has done a good job and put together something that's a great project in him.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Harris, I appreciate your time and appreciate your frankness in answering questions. I know we covered a lot of topics today, primarily HB 1283. We're thankful for leadership in the State House that can connect more people with their agricultural history and get their hands dirty. That's what we're here about.
Exactly.
That's what we're about here at Beets, Beds, and Browns.